Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
My name is Desirae Wilkerson, and I'm the co-owner of Paper Boat Booksellers in Seattle, Washington. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Emma Pattee, the author of Tilt, which will be out on March 25th. Emma Pattee is a climate journalist and fiction writer. Her work has been published in The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Washington Post, The Guardian, and elsewhere. She lives in Oregon, and Tilt is her first book, and it goes on sale March 25th. Thank you for joining me today, Emma.
Thank you, Desirae. I'm so happy to be here.
So I could just spend this whole interview gushing about this book, but I have a lot of questions too. I loved this book. A little bit about the book without giving too much away. It's about a woman who is 9 months pregnant. She is shopping in IKEA for a crib and a big earthquake hits. I'm in Seattle, so we like to say the big one, if it ever happens. We're always waiting. And it's about her journey to save herself in more ways than one. So this book, I just couldn't put it down. It was a thrill to read from the first page to the last page. And there are so many real and relatable people and scenes in this book. What inspired you to write this story?
You know, I live in Portland, so very, very close to Seattle. And, like you, I kind of, everyone in Portland, everyone in the Pacific Northwest lives kind of in under the shadow of something coming that you can never really prepare for. And so as a climate journalist, I was really interested in that. I was interested in the ways that we can't get prepared. And, at the time that I started writing this book, I was also pregnant. And I felt then that pregnancy and having a kid is also another thing that everyone tells you to get prepared for because of how sort of scary and unknowable it is. But the reality is that it's completely unknowable. You cannot imagine it until you have lived through it. So I think, that thematically is what brought me to the book. What gave me the idea for the book was definitely that I was terrified of the earthquake. I was pregnant and I could not stop thinking about the earthquake.
Oh, wow. I love that connection between those two things because it is so true about you can never prepare for having children, being pregnant, and an earthquake. That's amazing. Speaking of Annie, I found her feelings of confusion and loneliness of being pregnant really relatable to myself when I was pregnant for the first time. And you just kind of dived into a little bit about how Annie was relatable to you being pregnant and the fear of an earthquake. But is there any other ways that Annie relates to you?
Yeah, Annie is, I really find her relatable. We have made very different life choices. And, Annie is a very isolated character, and she's lonely and she's angry, but she also kind of doesn't she doesn't look to others. And a lot of the book is about that, right? It's about that sort of shift. And in that way, I don't know that I relate as much to her. But definitely, I once heard the writer Sheila Heti say that you kind of have to become the person you have to become in order to write the book you're trying to write. And I definitely feel, I started writing this book 6 years ago, when I was pregnant, when I was still in my 20s. I definitely feel like a lot of the lessons that Annie learns in the book are the lessons that I have learned in the past 6 years, certainly since becoming a mom, which is really about you cannot go it alone. You cannot go it alone. Yeah. And why would you want to? And so in that way, I no longer relate to her, but I believe that's because I learned the lessons I needed to learn in order to write the book I needed to write.
Oh, wonderful. Another big thing about this book is the pace, 24 hours. It seemed like when I finished it, what a perfect fit. It was such a good fit to just have this story in 24 hours. Um, did you start writing the book with the 24-hour timeline in mind, or did you start in a different way and figure this worked better?
Yeah. No, I always knew it would be immediately after the earthquake and then going from there. And because I knew that that I really wanted to write a stream of consciousness novel, I could not jump forward in time. And so what that meant is that I mean, to write it longer than a couple days, the book would be too long. There's just a
Mhm.
simple sort of page restriction to that. And there certainly were times that the book went a little bit longer than it does now. And there were times that it started a little bit before it does now. But I always, my very first impulse with this book was a woman talking to her child as she walks, and she's talking at the pace of how she's walking because she's trying to keep walking because she can't stop walking. And so it was always about this tempo of walking and this idea of a long walk. And so because of that, it was just very sort of naturally constrained to the moments you would be walking after a disaster, which is, immediately after.
Mhm. Yeah, I can't picture it any other way but the 24 hours, because that is what made it so easy to read, but also so just like can't put it down, like page turner the whole way.
I think I thought, as a little baby novelist, I think I thought it would make it easier to write. And it actually made it so incredibly challenging
Oh,
because
wow.
everything is tracked to the actual distance it would take to walk that within Portland. And so
Hmm.
I'm at all times while I'm writing, I have a Google map up. I'm timing it. I have a timeline of exactly the minute the earthquake happens and how long everything happens after. So when somebody would say like, well, what if you, whatever, throw in a car wash, throw into this, throw into that,
Hmm.
it'd be like, well, there is no car wash at that exact location in Portland. And there is no way for her to get to that location in the time you want it for it to be, it became this Tetris that
Hmm.
I really was not anticipating.
Oh, wow. That's actually was my next question, was the research that you had to do to get to nail down these details of the locations, because they're very, I mean, I've been to Portland several times, so I recognized everything, but of course not all the details. But it just, when I was reading it, seemed like, gosh, she really knows where she's going. Like I noticed it right away, all the details. So that was actually my next question, was the research you had to do that. So you actually went and walked those distances.
Yeah, so everything in the book is for the most part exactly as it is. Like you can go walk the exact journey she walks in essentially the time it takes her. Obviously, those of us not pregnant will walk a little bit faster. Um, and so you can, like it is an actual journey through Portland, and the details she sees are the details that, at least at the time of writing, were there. There are some times where I shifted things specifically around people's homes or things that,
Mhm.
around, if I brought in a character, then I would make sure that it was a place where it was definitely did not exist, so that nobody would look and say, oh, that house, got destroyed. And obviously, there's a lot we know in Portland and Seattle about how particular buildings are going to fare and how particular roads are going to fare, how particular neighborhoods are going to do. And so I brought all of that research to bear. I had a grad student who's becoming a geologist helping me, and we sort of went, road by road and building by building, and made sure that that I was, it was important to me as a journalist. Is just very important to me that it was fact based, but also as someone who lives in Portland, there was just no way I was going to scare people unnecessarily. And there was no way that I was going to soothe people unnecessarily. I wasn't going
Mhm.
to underwrite this disaster, but I certainly wasn't going to overwrite it. And I took that ethical responsibility really seriously. Um, and, I didn't want to just kind of traumatize people for no
Mhm.
purpose. So yeah,
Mhm.
the book is as close to sort of a nonfiction depiction
Mhm.
of an earthquake that hasn't happened yet that, that it could possibly be.
Wow. I love that. I loved that it was very real. Like this could actually happen, but and it was scary, of course, because we're all, I mean, we're hoarding water underneath in our basement, just in case, but we probably won't even be at home, Um, but it was it was very prominent in the book, that realness of everything. Um, so the ending really brought the whole story full circle for Annie and her journey. Um, and I felt like as I was getting towards the end, it could have ended in any way. Did you ever have another ending in mind?
Yeah, I did have another ending in mind. For many years, the ending was different. And I learned that when you're writing, challenging books, I think sometimes we write the scenes that we can bear at the time that we can bear them. Like when I was writing this book, I was pregnant when I started the book. But then I had a baby, right? And then I had a toddler, and then I was pregnant again, then I had another. It is incredibly hard to write terrifying scenes. When you have small children. And there was a lot of times that I had to have a placeholder scene before I could kind of bear to write the scene that had to be there. And so, yeah, and there was a lot of discussion with my editor about how the book was going to end. And certainly for hearing from early readers, there is a lot of debate about if the ending is, the right ending or not. And I love that. I think if anyone reads this book and hates the ending, I love that. Like, hold on to your hate.
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about hating endings or loving endings or debating endings. And I think that for me, I ended up having to really get clear on the truest message of the book. And it stopped being about what would feel satisfying to a reader or what would feel emotionally soothing to me as this terrified parent, and really became, Emma, what are you trying to say? And I said it.
I thought and I loved the ending. I mean, I cried my eyes out at the end because there was sadness, but there was also like this hope that came.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it really speaks to the thing in the beginning we were talking about, being lonely, being isolated, going something alone. And, really speaks to, I think, that shift. Something that I tried to shove into the book and they forced me to take it out is that there's some research that shows that when rats have children, when rats become mothers, they can catch prey 5 times. They become 5 times as successful at catching prey, and they become significantly more efficient and more vicious at catching food. And I really wanted to show that this idea that when you become a mother, that's what is changing in your brain, what is changing in your whole physiology, it makes you a warrior. And we don't have language for that in our culture. That's not how we talk about mothering and nurturing in our culture,
Right.
but that's the biological reality. And I really wanted to show that in the book.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And as mothers, we would go to any lengths and do anything possible for our children. I mean, I definitely felt that in the book for sure. Well, thank you so much, Emma. This was wonderful. I love hearing all of this. Thank you for answering my questions and talking deeper about the book. I can't wait to sell it. And those details, like the location and how you got those locations, are just, I feel, something that I can really talk to our customers about, and just an interesting fact that I can give them about the author.
Thank you so much, Desirae. I'm excited to come see you in your new location.
Yes, definitely come visit for sure.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!